So performance is something that we constantly strive towards. But this time around, though, we did not significantly focus on performance, but performance was kind of innate because we are now breaking down a monolith into tiny pieces. So you get that innate performance improvement, less resources, less startup time. So just that startup time itself and the memory consumption, that itself is a huge boost. But along with that, the performance, it wasn't given as much importance as it was with 2018, though, because there was so much other stuff to do. But still, there will be some improvements depending on it.
ColdFusion Alive, the podcast for the ColdFusion community. Discover practices, tools, techniques, tips and trends for modern ColdFusion development. Brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Here is your host, the founder of TerraTech, Michaela Light.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Rakshith Naresh, who is the Senior Product Manager for ColdFusion at Adobe. And we're going to be talking about ColdFusion 2021 that just released a few weeks ago. Very exciting. And he is the man who talks to all the ColdFusion customers, figures out what new features to have, decides the future of ColdFusion among with all the other people in the Adobe team. Welcome, Rakshith.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. It's great to be a part of CF Live podcast again.
Yes, great to have you back. I wish we were talking in person like we did in India last year, but unfortunately this year has been a bit weird. Right. But the ColdFusion team at Adobe persevered through the lockdown and the corona and the economic craziness and managed to get ColdFusion 2021 out before CF Summit, which was last week. So congrats on that.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, and congratulations to all of us on this new release.
Yes. And thanks to all the beta testers in the ColdFusion community who helped out with it too. I know there were a lot of... How many people were on the beta test? Do you know?
It was definitely in the hundreds. So at least 400 to 500 folks. Yeah.
Wow. Now, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about like an overview of what's in there, but there's so many new features in this release that I don't think we can do it justice in one episode. So we're going to have to come back to you or other team members to dig down in detail on some of that stuff. Is that cool with you? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Okay, but let's what we're going to cover today is we're going to have a look at an overview of what's in there. We're also going to look at some of the story of how you guys got this out in these trying circumstances, this release, and also why the name of the release changed at the last minute. And then I've got some questions that CFers have sent me online through the ColdFusion Programmers Facebook group. So we'll have a look at those too, because a lot of people are really interested in this new version of ColdFusion and are curious about some of the new features and the new licensing or old licensing they didn't realize was still there. And, the move to the cloud and microservices and so on. So
sure.
That's the plan for the episode. So let's dig right in. Let's just talk about what is in ColdFusion 2021. What are the new things? I keep hearing the word cloud, and I don't know if I know you have a vision statement for it. I don't know if you have that ingrained in your brain because Ashish has been repeating it daily.
Absolutely. So yes, so I can talk about that. So yes, so when we envisioned the next version of ColdFusion a couple of years ago, it was sometime early last year is when we kind of started trying to envision what the new version is going to be all about. So we were focused on addressing some of the key challenges out there, right? So we were talking to a lot of customers, trying to understand what are the key challenges. And we wanted to ensure that ColdFusion has survived for like 25 years now, right? And it's doing well. In fact, Ashish also spoke about in recently the keynote, right? So it continues to do well for Adobe, and Adobe is more than ever committed to ColdFusion. So we wanted to come up with a release that's kind of game-changing for the rest of the decade as well. So we are in the beginning of a new decade. We wanted to ensure that This will be a game-changing release for the next decade as well. So if you look at the history of ColdFusion has always been able to evolve itself to accommodate how the web is changing or how the world is changing around us. So we wanted to make such shifts at this point of time around the cloud and microservices story, because every new application that's being built out there, it's most probably a microservice based application. And every new application that's being built out there most probably has some kind of a presence on the cloud, right? So when we spoke to our customers, it was clear to us that our customers are moving to the cloud. When they build a new application, they go about not building the huge monolith application of the past, but break it down into tiny pieces like a microservice. So the question to us was, okay, so our customers are doing this. What are the problems that they're facing? So when we dug deeper and tried to find out what those issues are, the number one issue on the cloud was there was no easy way for ColdFusion to talk to various cloud services. For instance, if you're on AWS or on Azure, there was no easy way to talk to those services with ease in ColdFusion because there is no ColdFusion specific SDK available, whereas Java and other languages had this SDK. Now, the question to us was, okay, we can come up with a really nice interface for these services. Can we do it better? Can we differentiate ourselves from the SDKs out there? So when we actually dug deeper and tried to find out what can be done there, we realized that ColdFusion has always been about productivity, right? So can we come up with a productive interface to these cloud services better than the best? For instance, if you look at all the SDKs out there for the cloud services, Node seems to be doing relatively better than the rest, with Java being the most bulky. So for us, the benchmark was Node. So we have done a better job than Node in terms of the number of lines it takes to talk to those services. The advantage that ColdFusion has is we also have the language, right? So we can introduce constructs that we need to make sure it's a productive interface. Now, how do we differentiate ourselves from competition? So one of the other challenges that we understood was CIOs are actually thinking about, not banking on one single cloud provider anymore. They are worried that, okay, my entire business is now on AWS, so I'm banking on AWS. So they would like to though it's not a current problem, it's a future problem that they're thinking about. How do we solve this? Can we move some part of our application to a different cloud provider as well, perhaps Azure, so that you can take advantage of both the clouds and not completely have your bets on one single cloud provider? So that was a huge opportunity for us. So we came up with not just a productive interface, but something that none of the other technologies offer. A common unified interface that can talk to Azure as well as AWS. So if you're trying to use those really neat interface that we have in CFML now to talk to AWS S3 storage interface, you can use the same interface to talk to Azure storage as well. Azure Blob Service, as they call it. So it's so simple. You just need to make that one flip and it works like magic. So that is the differentiator. And that is what ColdFusion can give our customers. You're not just locked into one single cloud. You can actually expand into other clouds as well. So that is the cloud story, I would say. That's one part of the story. But it's not just about cloud. So, I don't want people to kind of assume that, ColdFusion 2021, it's only for the cloud. No. If you're on the cloud, yes, you can take some advantages of the services that we have. But the next big significant one that we have done is to be microservices friendly. So the entire ColdFusion server itself was a monolith. It was a huge server. The installer itself was like more than 1 gigabyte. Now our installer is just a zip installer of less than 200 MB, including the Java runtime. So if you take off the Java runtime, the ColdFusion runtime is much, much tinier. So it's less than 200 MB, starts up in like under 5 seconds.
That's much quicker than before. That's like an 80% improvement. Right?
Absolutely. You're right. So it's a significant improvement. And we have broken down the runtime into tiny pieces. And this was a huge, huge engineering task. You spoke about, you were asking me about the challenges, right? So when we envisioned the new version of ColdFusion, we never knew that the world would be down like the way it is right now. So all of us had to shift to a remote workplace. And despite that, we I'm proud of what we have been able to accomplish, because this was no insignificant task. Breaking down the runtime into tiny pieces and bundling, basically creating your own ColdFusion runtime with ColdFusion 2021. So if you're making use of database and nothing else, you just use the database component and the core runtime, and that's about it. So that you get a tiny runtime to build your microservices on. To me, these two are the key pieces that will take ColdFusion well into the next decade and do a really good job of it. So this is the beginning, I would say. So the vision that we have around cloud and microservices, it's not one single release. We made significant stride in ColdFusion 2021, but there's a lot more to be done, and that's coming up in the subsequent versions. Coming to your name change, I'll just touch upon the last point that you spoke about. So yes, earlier it was supposed to be ColdFusion 2020, but it was so at the very end of the year to give it a fresh feeling. We actually named it as ColdFusion 2021. That was the only reason. So Adobe does this, particularly when it's at the fag end of the year and you have a launch coming up. You would generally use next year's version number so that you bring that freshness around for the next year as well. Otherwise, 2020 is gone, and that version already kind of feels stale, though it's just a few months old. So to make use of that, we named it 2021. It's got nothing to do with the whole scenario right now.
Yes, I was talking to Jorge Reyes at Ortis about the Into the Box conference, and they decided to make, just like Adobe did with CF Summit being free, and you can get the recordings from CF Summit, which maybe we'll talk about a bit later, or I'll put them in the show notes, free as well. Ortis decided to make Into the Box LATAM free, and one of the reasons Jorge gave, apart from it was a Black Friday, Thanksgiving, special, he also said this was the horrible year in Spanish. Año, I forget the exact Spanish. My Spanish isn't perfect, but yeah, it's probably best to call it 2021. That totally makes sense. Now, you mentioned future versions, because one of the things people ask is, well, are there going to be future versions? So you're confirming here today revealing in the podcast that there will be a future version. And what's the code name for that?
Absolutely. As I said, Adobe is more than ever committed to ColdFusion. ColdFusion continues to do well for Adobe. Just look at the investment that we've done with this version. This was a significant task, right? The breaking down the modules, coming up with this cloud integration.
What was the man-year investment on the development team? You had like 20 people working on this, or?
So generally, we don't talk about it outside of Adobe, though, but still, it's way more than 20. So it's not just 20. It's way more.
Well, let me ask the question a different way, because you can't give it. I understand you have to be confidential on some things, but how was the investment compared to previous releases? Was it a much bigger task to get this one done because of all the changes?
Yes, it was way bigger. Yeah, it was way bigger. Considering, breaking down a monolith, I'm sure many of our developers out there who understand the challenges of breaking a monolith application into a microservice application, they understand the challenges, right? That's no mean task. And this time you're talking about a runtime that used to support basically everything, right? ColdFusion is like an enterprise hub that talks to a whole range of services. Now, if you have to break that down into tiny pieces, it's a significant effort. And in fact, we had actually planned this over 2 releases. We didn't want to get to the 100% state with ColdFusion 2021. We had actually envisioned that, okay, let's go maybe 50% with 2021 and come up with the next release and then accomplish it. But as I said, the team did a fantastic job of that and actually accomplished the full-fledged modularity in 2021 itself. And despite this current situation, having accomplished that is something that is commendable.
That is amazing. And for listeners, it's not just breaking up the code, it's making sure it still actually works correctly after you've broken it up into pieces. It's pretty easy to break up code. It's having it still work reliably, in a dynamic way like it does now. Now, in addition to getting, adding the easy cloud support, and I just want to say, I think over the whole 25 years I've been involved in ColdFusion, the number one keyword for me is easy development, rapid application development. agnostic as to what database you use or what email provider you use. And I think you've continued this tradition with the multi-cloud support, that you don't have to
Absolutely.
change all your code out to switch. And then making the REST services for, easier to use. I saw that in one of the presentations at CF Summit. And then in addition to all that enormous engineering effort, you added, must have been nearly a dozen new language features, for parallelism and, identity operators and better Java support and immediately invokable function expressions in functions, and Lambda support, and all kinds of really cool things in there that I don't think we have time to go into each of those. I have to come back to one of your other incredibly talented engineers to talk about some of those in detail, I think. But I'm just very impressed that you not only got all this new release out, totally re-architected under the hood, and it still performs better than older versions of ColdFusion as well. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. So performance is something that we constantly strive towards. But this time around, though, we did not significantly focus on performance, but performance was kind of innate because we are now breaking down a monolith into tiny pieces. So you get that innate performance improvement, less resources, less startup time. So just that startup time itself and the memory consumption, that itself is a huge boost. But along with that, the performance, it wasn't given as much importance as it was with 2018, though, because there was so much other stuff to do. But still, there will be some improvements depending on.
Well, and I just to be honest, Rakshith, I talk to a lot of ColdFusion customers, and they're not all on 2018. You probably knew that. So anyone listening who is on 2016, 2011 or older, first of all, those are, 2011 went end of life quite a long time ago. You should not be running older versions of ColdFusion. And 2016 goes end of life, I want to say next April. So you need to be looking at upgrading your 2016.
Absolutely.
But the point I was trying to make here is if you're running an older version of ColdFusion, it's going to run, maybe 50% faster just without changing a single line of code. You just update the ColdFusion, and now it is more efficient in running the code. And that still is true for 2021. So
absolutely.
I don't think you should shortchange yourself on the performance. And then there's the other secret feature that you guys work really hard on that hasn't been mentioned in any of the talks you gave that I'm aware of, which is you really focus on having excellent security. I think it's the best security in any of the web development platforms out there, according to I forget the name. I'll put the link in the thing, but there's an independent organization that looks at language security, and ColdFusion came out top on that. And so I just want to recognize that, you still have your security czar behind the scenes, making sure that all the developers are writing secure code. And I think it's correct that all the developers on the ColdFusion platform, they get trained on how to write secure code.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point that you mentioned, Michaela. So yes, the entire team is security certified, and it's not just that. One of the advantages of being in such a large company like Adobe is we have top quality security experts. So we have something called as the product security incident response team, and a group of security experts as well within Adobe who manage security across all the products. So one is, if there is a security vulnerability in the wild, they are the first ones who come to know about it, and they are the ones who interact with the product team and make sure that the fix is released as quickly as possible in the best possible manner, in the most secure manner as well. And every release, we actually work with a group of security experts within Adobe. This is not the product team, though. This is outside. So we also have access to...
they're independent within Adobe.
Not independent. So at the Adobe level. So Adobe has...
but they're not part of the development team. So you can't boss them around.
No.
If there's a security issue, they'll bring it up and it can't be ignored.
Yes, that's correct. So they look at the code, they look at the design, and this time around, though, we did something additional for security. We also got a third-party vendor to certify, so a security organization to actually certify or find issues, basically to find any potential issues, considering we're making serious architecture changes, right? So we didn't want any potential security issues to come up because of that. So we actually hired an independent vendor, a security vendor, to take a look at all our new architecture, new implementation, and they actually gave us a public facing report. So we will make that available as well very shortly. It's a public facing report that talks about how secure ColdFusion 2021 is.
I will look forward to that. I'd give you 3 thumbs up on that, but I've only got 2 thumbs. So, but I think for a lot of CIOs, particularly in education and government, but also in large enterprise organizations, security is very, very important. You cannot believe the amount of egg that gets on people's faces when their server gets hacked, or there's some kind of blackmail thing going on, or confidential info is leaked. It can close a company down or an organization if that happens. I just want to mention one additional secret feature that you guys, I don't think, talked about, and that's backward compatibility. As far as I know, if you've got existing code, it runs just fine on 2021, and there's a compatibility checker built in, right, where you can look for any really ancient code that you might have in your code base that needs tweaking. Right. But generally speaking, if you've written good code, it's going to run just fine in 2021. And in addition, although it's rah go cloud, and we know that 70% of new apps are being written with cloud in mind, or being run on a cloud server, there's still 30% of new apps running on dedicated boxes or virtual private servers. Is ColdFusion still run on those dedicated servers?
Absolutely. It runs, and it runs way better because of the architecture changes that we have done. Those are not cloud specific, right? So the runtime becoming more leaner with only required components. And also too, so one other thing that we do not talk about much is the ability to script the settings. Every single setting in ColdFusion, you no longer have to log into the administrator and then manually go ahead and enter from the graphical user interface. Every single setting is scriptable. So what I mean by that is you can replicate. So let's say you have 10 different servers. You just need to create one single script and replicate that script across all the different servers. So that is really powerful, again, especially for our larger customers who have a lot more servers and even microservices. If you have a lot of microservices, it's so much easier to just configure it once and reuse it whenever you need to. So that's one other thing. One other important capability of ColdFusion 2021. And also too, from the security point of view, Michaela, we have also introduced single sign-on as well. So single sign-on is pretty much a default. I mean, it's like a default capability in any application, right? Be it an enterprise application or an end user application, you need to have the single sign-on capability. Now, we have significantly reduced the effort needed to build single sign-on applications. You just need to use a couple of built-in functions, and you can talk to any SAML-based single sign-on server to actually get single sign-on working with ColdFusion. And that's also in 2021.
That's great.
This podcast is brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Get detailed show notes on today's episode and your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at terratech.com. That is TERATECH.com. And now back to today's show.
That's great. I remember a couple of years ago working on a SAML single sign-on in ColdFusion. Oh my God, was it a headache. So I'm very grateful for you doing that. Are there any plans for other single sign-on things? I know there's several other single sign-on technologies out there.
Not at this point of time. SAML appears to be pretty much a standard right now for single sign-on. So, Okta or anything else, it's all SAML based. So at this point, I don't think there's a need. But if the need comes up, we will look at other other single sign-on servers as well. So SAML is basically like a protocol, more of a standard for single sign-on. Mm-hmm. So we work with any SAML-based server at this point of time.
Excellent. So I've got a question for myself here. I must admit, when ColdFusion new releases come out, I like to play around with them. And I will tell a tip to listeners, even though the install from Adobe is really easy now and cool, the easiest way to try this out on your own development laptop is to use command box, and it's just a single command line to run it up. Doesn't mess with any of your other installs of ColdFusion. It's running in a little virtual thing. And that's already out there, thanks to Brad Wood, who got that out like within, I think, a day or two of ColdFusion releasing. So if you're curious about these new features, but you're a bit concerned, hey, I don't want to spend time installing, or I don't want to mess up what I have, just use command box to spin it up and get it running. And you can play with everything going on here in ColdFusion 2021. So, that's
absolutely
a tip.
Yeah,
there.
I think Artus does a great job with command box. So yes, it was great to see that Artus released the ColdFusion 2021 version very, very shortly as soon as we launched it.
But I must admit, when it comes to production servers, I'm always a little nervous putting 0.0 releases out. And the question I'm curious about, Adobe does a great job of getting hotfixes out. Do you know roughly when there will be a hotfix out for this that addresses any?
We are not sure about an exact date. I think that's a good question. So yes, I do know that quite a few of our customers wait for the first update to kind of move to production, because just setting up those servers itself is quite a task for some of our larger customers, especially. It takes quite a few months to actually move from one version to another. By then, you would typically have the first update coming out. So we don't have a specific date at this point of time, but we are working towards an update already. So we are in the process of prioritizing what issues to focus on. And we will, I would say, by the end of this year, we would have some idea about when will that happen, when will that come out. But I'm not sure about an exact date at this point of time, but it should be pretty soon. So so I would say definitely before the first few months of next year, we will have an update.
Let's just say quarter one.
Yeah, quarter one.
that gives you a bit of flexibility there. But soon is the answer, because a lot of people celebrate holidays at the end of the year for Christmas or New Year's or whatever. So I think early next year is good for that. And to be honest, people need to try out this stuff. Start migrating their apps over.
Right.
So I works good for me. Now, let's go. Let's talk a bit about some of these questions that came in. I know you've got a limited amount of time today because you're working from home and it's late at night, and probably you've got a delicious dinner waiting for you. Let's talk about some of these things. Now, one of the things that people are always interested in is about the ColdFusion IDE, the editor you use for your code. Now, are there any plans to update CF Builder next year, or any other editors?
Absolutely. So just like how the ColdFusion server has undergone a significant transformation, the builder is undergoing a significant transformation too. So 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, actually. So when we started building an IDE, Eclipse was a great platform back then. But now we have a really powerful platform, which is VS Code. So we will be the next version of ColdFusion Builder will be on VS Code as a platform. I know that it's a really popular platform among our ColdFusion developers as well. So it just makes sense. So
that is amazing news. Because I think that's the most popular editor out there, VS Code. It's a free editor. I think Microsoft publishes it, but it's open source, and already has a lot of extensions. But you say you're going to put out some Adobe extensions that make it even cooler for ColdFusion development.
Absolutely, wow. That's correct. So yes.
Wow, we've got to do an episode on that when it's a bit nearer to fruition. And then so that's the news on CF Builder. And then do you know when in 2021 that might appear, or?
So yes, so it's definitely not in Q1 of next year. That's going to take some time. So the team was busy with the server changes that we had to do. So it's going to take some time. Definitely next year is what I would say, but I'm not sure about the exact date at this point of time.
Okay, because at CF Summit, someone said first half of 2021, but maybe that's moved around a bit.
Yeah, so yes, we are targeting first half of 2021, but I'm not really sure if we can meet it or if we can beat it as well. So I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Got it. All right, now let's, a lot of people do ColdFusion development with front-end tools like Angular, React, or Vue. Were there any improvements made in 2021 for working with those front-end technologies, with REST or other things?
So, yes. So when it comes to improvements, one of the improvements that we did last time around, I think that applies even now, is data type preservation. So with JavaScript, so what used to happen was, since ColdFusion is pretty much typeless, when the JSON data from either any of those popular frameworks used to come into ColdFusion, or when data goes out from ColdFusion to those JavaScript frameworks, sometimes, it's only sometimes, what used to happen was a number used to become a string, and string used to become a number. So it was a messy behavior that ColdFusion servers, the previous ColdFusion servers had. Now we came up with something called as data type preservation. So you can actually ensure that the data coming in, if you want that to be treated as a number only, ColdFusion continues to treat that as a number, and when the data is going back out, it continues to be a number. So that was one significant improvement, and I think that still stands with 2021. And the rest is the default standard, right, for anything on the back end right now. So that's the initiation, I would say. So it's no longer, your user interface is no longer written in ColdFusion. It's actually written in those popular, it's actually developed using those popular frameworks out there, and we understand that. And ColdFusion, the initiation happens through a REST service. So the REST capabilities are already improved, and we are planning to take it to the next level as well, and try to see if we can auto-generate some of those REST services as a part of the next version. But it's still early days, I would say. So REST services continue to be really simple in ColdFusion, so you can easily invoke that from any of the popular front-end frameworks. So it's as simple as making a REST call to any other technology. So ColdFusion can also take the same REST calls like other technologies. So it doesn't really matter whether you're using Node, PHP, or ColdFusion. So ColdFusion makes the REST services building really simple. And when you're invoking it from various front-end frameworks, it's just like any other technologies. Absolutely no difference.
That is great, because a lot of people are doing really cool front ends in those front end technologies. So better integration there. And I think we should just clear up a confusion, because one person said, is ColdFusion in competition with these technologies? And it's not in competition at all. They're just a totally different way of doing things. The Angular or React or Vue are focused on the front end. They're replacing lots of JavaScript code that you'd have to custom write. And ColdFusion is on the back end, and it's doing all the heavy lifting behind the scenes that's feeding APIs to those front ends.
Absolutely. Right. And it gels well with any of those technologies. It's definitely not in competition. Yeah.
Excellent. So, all right. So I know we've only got time for one more question here, and I'd love to have you come back another day, because we have so many questions from people interested in ColdFusion 2021. Are you okay doing that another time? Do another episode with wrapping up these questions?
Sure, can do that.
Excellent. So one question several people have asked in different ways is there a roadmap for the future of ColdFusion, or is ColdFusion 2021 the final version?
Not at all. So we are actually working on the next version already. So we just finished we just wrapped up ColdFusion 2021, right? So we're already working on the next version. It's called Project Athena. And as I said, the vision that we have, it's a multi-version vision. So it's not just for ColdFusion 2021. So you will see significant parts of it rolling out in Project Athena as well. So that's the code name for the next version. Project Stratus was the code name for ColdFusion 2021. The next one is called Project Athena. So we also have a public facing roadmap. I think it's already ready and it should be up. Else I'll have to go back and check if it's not up. So we will have a public facing roadmap as well that talks about, where we are with Project Stratus and Project Athena as well. It talks about the focus areas as well. So yes, so we have a public facing roadmap as well that anybody can take a look at, and that's Adobe's commitment. So if you think about it, with every version of the product, Michaela, we have like 5 years of core support and 2 years of extended support with every version of the product. 4 years of core support and 2 years of extended support actually. So if you're talking about Project Athena coming out maybe next year or the year after, we are talking about a commitment till like perhaps 2028, and that just shows the long-term commitment that Adobe has for ColdFusion as a product.
Well, I'd love if you can send me that public-facing roadmap. I'd love to include that in the show notes and get that out there, because I hadn't heard of that, and I don't imagine other people have. So,
sure,
great to see that. I'll add that into the show notes whenever it's available. And then I just want to, I think you said, 5 years full support, 2 years extended support. So if we take 7 years in 2021, that gets you 2028. But you said there's already a future version you guys are planning that you're taking suggestions from customers for Project Athena. Yes. And we don't know exactly when that's going to release, but let's just imagine it's released in 2023. Another 7 years on that gets you to 2030. Right. So really, if we put together what you just said and read between the lines, there's a commitment from Adobe through the end of the decade, at least, and probably beyond that. But certainly there's corporate commitment to that. So and I think, the reality here is that ColdFusion is incredibly successful as a programming language inside Adobe. In fact, I don't know if Adobe has any other programming languages that are more successful than ColdFusion. I'm not aware of them. And there's no reason they would stop doing it, right? It makes lots of money. You have a great team together. Absolutely. You've got lots of cool customers. It integrates well with your other technologies. I sort of am kind of confused at this point. People have been saying ColdFusion's going to die for over 10 years. It never does, and it gets better and better, and you guys have more and more success with it. Yeah. I think we need to put that horse to bed, or whatever the appropriate phrase is.
Absolutely. I think it is time. It was time, and it is time again. So I think it doesn't make sense at all anymore, because, when Adobe, Macromedia was acquired by Adobe, people started saying that Adobe is going to kill ColdFusion and all of that. So
that was 15 years ago. In internet years, I don't know. You know how they say dog years is it 7 years or something? And I don't know what internet years is. Let's say it's 5 years between technology evolving. Yeah, that was 15 years ago, folks. That's 3 lifetimes in terms of software development years. And the latest release of ColdFusion is embracing it's not just embracing the future, it's leading the future. It's better than any other language in multi-cloud support and a lot of this microservice stuff. I would say if this was a horse race, the ColdFusion horse is now edged ahead of Node.js in those particulars, and it was way ahead of Node.js in other features. In fact, Nolan Erck gave a great talk on comparing Node.js and ColdFusion, and basically, anything you can do, we can do better is basically how it came out. So awesome. You can compare it. If you compare it to .NET or Java, and I've talked with some CIO. I talked to a CIO, and we'll wrap this up because I know you have to go, but I talked to a CIO recently he came in new. He said, let's get rid of this ColdFusion stuff and go to .NET. He spent 18 months, millions of dollars recoding it in .NET. It never got completed. Finally, he had to come back with his tail between his legs to the ColdFusion team, who was still maintaining the existing ColdFusion app, and said, hey guys, could you update this? And within 3 months, they had it all updated. They'd done everything he was trying to do, at far less cost, far less time. And he kind of finally admitted, I shouldn't have ever done this rewrite thing in .NET. It was a nutso idea. You drink the Kool-Aid from Microsoft or Oracle, you think these other technologies do everything, but they don't. I'm sorry to say that. I don't like saying that sometimes companies put out fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but they do.
Absolutely. I think you said it right. So I've heard similar stories as well, Michaela. So what you heard was with .NET. I have heard stories with Java, moving out from ColdFusion to Java, then coming back to ColdFusion. So I've heard a lot of such success stories for ColdFusion in a similar fashion.
Cool. Well, we will put the show notes up at the TerraTech site. We really appreciate you coming on the show today. You're looking radiantly full of health. It must be all that yoga you do out in India. So,
yeah, I picked it up after talking to you. So yes.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm glad I spread some good things. I mean, I picked it up from India, so it only came a full circle. And if people want to reach you online, what are the best ways to do that, Rakshith?
Reach me online. I would say Facebook used to be. I used to spend significant amount of time on Facebook, but not so much anymore. Definitely on the blog post. So we keep making those blog posts. The community portal, I would say those are definitely the right avenues. So make a post, ask a question on the community portal. I would say that's the right way to go. So I would say that's the best route of it, so that others from the community can also contribute. It's not just me talking about it, but others can also pitch in. I would say the community portal is the right way to go to reach out to me.
All right. Well, I'll put the link to that just for the few people who don't know about the Adobe ColdFusion community portal. Great place to be. And if you post and comment a lot, they give you prizes. You can get a free copy of various software they have, or other things. So
absolutely.
And then if people have suggestions for either ColdFusion 2021 issues they're having, or if they have suggestions for the future versions of ColdFusion, how should they tell you or other people on the team about that?
I think the community portal, again, make a post saying that, I know that the next version is coming up. So these are the set of things that they believe are the ones that Adobe should look at. We would be more than welcome to take a look at. We also receive a lot of enhancement requests on our bug tracker. We do have a public bug tracking system, right? So we do have a lot of folks who log enhancements saying that, hey, can you do this as a part of the next version? And we honor we can't honor all of those, but we do try our best to honor quite a bit of those. So that's also a great way to let us know that these are some of the enhancements that you're looking at from Adobe.
Yeah, I will put the link to the public bug tracker in the show notes too. I really appreciate you coming on the show and telling us all about the exciting new release of ColdFusion, and look forward to talking to you again to answer more ColdFusion developer questions and talk to other members of the Adobe Development ColdFusion team about in depth on some of those cool new features. Thanks so much, Rakshith.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for this opportunity, Michaela. It's always great to be in conversation with you on these interviews.
Get detailed show notes on today's episode in your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at terratech.com. That is TERATECH.com. Viva la CF Alive Revolution!